Max Verstappen has got the FIA over a barrel. And it might just about save Formula One from itself. And he's doing it, Max, in a way that Lando Norris can only dream of. We all remember the Formula E quip, the steroids one. That was pretty funny. It was sharp, too, and very relevant, and it gave that series a little bit of free commercial space. But this time around, he's gone a slightly different route, and it's actually a more scathing way, too. These new rules could bore fans. Straight in the heart of Stefano Domenicali right there, Max. Speaking to Viaplay and picked up by Motorsport Week, Verstappen's leaned into something he does better than almost anyone, using his championship creds as a battering ram. Hamilton and Alonso have aired concerns too, but Max's comments are landing harder right now. Whenever we hear Fernando and Lewis speak, we are sort of reminded of the old man yells at cloud meme. They're tired, man. They just want to try and get some silverware before they retire, whereas Max, he's still got plenty of spirit left in him. So here are Max's comments for your consideration. The new rules will be complicated to follow and to explain. That's the main thing. In the end, it's still a Formula One car, a race car, and we will still qualify and race, but it'll take some getting used to for everyone. Also, in terms of overtaking, I honestly have no idea yet how they will play out, so there are still a lot of question marks for all of us. On the other hand, that also makes it interesting because it gives you a reason to tune in. Now, yeah, he is offering some opportunities for these regulations, but the question mark? Formula One hates question marks. Because for quite a major segment of their audience, the casual fans, a question mark can simply just turn into, I don't get it. And eventually, I don't get it turns to, you know what, I'm out. I mean, I've already seen plenty in the comments saying I'm not watching Formula One this year, so that tells you all you need to know, really. And if you can't instantly know why a pass worked or why the guy behind didn't just do, as Daniel Ricciardo would put it, lick the stamp and send it on the brakes, you stop feeling smart for watching. We've all been there. You love something, you know everything there is to know about it, then somebody asks you a very simple question. And in a passionate daze, and somebody actually taking an interest in something you like, you hand them, very, very spiritedly, a 400-page instruction manual in how everything is understood. Next thing you know, their eyes have glazed over. Yeah, the steroids quip was funny, it got a lot of traction, but him saying that these rules could be complicated to follow and to explain, that actually is nastier than the quote about steroids. Max ain't relying on a meme to get his word across. He's actually giving this product a very scathing review. Not exactly a 1-star, but it's more like a 2-star. There's room for improvement, but it's still suboptimal. And it actually touches a very big nerve of Liberty Media, the growth nerve, especially in the US market, as we all know. I mean, I don't think you need me to tell you how proudly Liberty Media has talked about its recent entertainment acquisitions and partnerships. You know, partnering up with Apple, the Disney collaboration, all of those big fintech companies like Visa and American Express coming on board, having a pasta partner in Barilla, a chocolate partner in Kit Kat. They are really, really busy in getting big-name partners for just about anything. But that really depends on one important thing. All those people you're bringing on board, including the Doritos lot, so really with Gatorade, F1's going for the old MLG crowd, those brand new fans need to understand exactly what they're getting themselves into, and Max is saying they're at a risk of maybe not getting it and then immediately tuning out again, meaning all of that time and money, getting all of these partnerships on the road, the campaigns, it'll all have been a waste of money. Yeah, Liberty Media has proven that it can survive a lot of drama. I mean, it did come out the other side of Abu Dhabi 21, but what it might not be able to survive so easily is that if you want to watch our sport, you're really going to have to sit down and read the manual to properly understand it and get something out of it. That is their biggest fear. And that is something that I think Max is really exploiting a lot of just now. And these rule changes are some of the biggest changes to the sport's entire history and concept. It's changing racing as we know it. And most of these changes, they're under the hood. Stuff we can't see and immediately go, oh, well, okay, that's different. Because the exterior looks more like the late 2000s cars, which, honestly, as an old school fan, is fine by me. And the old faithful, DRS, well, that's gone, replaced by active aerostates and energy modes that can be toggled and rationed. And we've already seen the FIA and Formula One having to walk back the terminology, because straight mode, corner mode, boost, overtake, recharge, those weren't the original nomenclatures. It was X mode, it was Z mode, and Mom, anyone? Yeah, Mom was hard to understand and it immediately told you there were some communication issues. I wouldn't be surprised to see some more changes, both to terminology as well as actually how the sport is run. All those technical changes, those fanciful changes, they'll be simplified in some way to make it less impactful, and people will just think, oh, it's just exactly the same. Whereas the engineers, the hardcore fans will know, actually, no, it's far more complex than that. And I'm even seeing some people getting wistful for DRS. Yes, it was controversial, and in some cases made the sport a little bit artificial, but at least we understood it. The flap goes up, the car goes faster. You might have a chance of overtaking. Instead, you have straight mode, but then straight mode might not necessarily work because, well, there might be some caveats, say, to do with, oh, well, the energy deployment wasn't really in his favour, and now he's going to have to harvest a little bit more. Yes, it's technically fascinating. I don't honestly mind it. But Max, the way he's speaking right now, sounds more like a consumer warning rather than a technical review, and that might make Formula One sit up and take notice. Him stressing to the owners of this particular shop front that if you change the layout too much, customers will walk out, and come on, you must be with me here. If you go grocery shopping, don't you just hate it when they change the layout? I certainly do. But fortunately, the FIA's response has been more candid than I would have expected. They're basically admitting tweaks might be needed after all. They are listening. With Nicholas Tombassis, the head of FIA's single-seater division, being very careful with his words. Even though he said things aren't fully squared away yet, things are better than the earlier simulation runs. There's room for improvement, and we have to look here. Verstappen hasn't walked away. Max can make these regulations work. He'll still be really good at them, but it doesn't necessarily mean he has to like them. And he's been able to figure out that in this day and age, the fact that these 2026 rules have actually made it to prime time after all, after his earlier protests in 2023, that maybe the best way to get his message across is not through the act of swearing, because, well, he found out for himself that won't get him anywhere with the new FIA president. It's more about leaning on the nerves of perception, optics. F1 really cares about its image. It cares about the show. Even though Max and many other drivers probably hate that aspect of Formula One, at least he understands it. The sport watches the reaction of the fans and maybe changes the product in light of those reactions. Even though many times we have to get the foam of doubt out when Stefano says, oh, well, people really like sprints, so we'll make half of the entire calendar sprints. I personally don't mind sprints, but there are many people out there who really hate sprints with a passion. But I think drivers, and I'm not just talking about Max here, actually have managed to find some kind of a pressure point and are leaning on that with much more effect than before. Because Max can just get on the blower to the world and say that he doesn't like something, and the FIA sits up and takes notice. I can't imagine this happening 20 years ago, even if you were Michael Schumacher or Fernando Alonso back then. You would have been more likely to get your word across in private with the FIA in a secret meeting that we would have never heard the results of unless it actually produced some kind of a result. Now though, if you get to the right people, you can instantly spread your word across the world. Sure, Max may hate the media, but in this circumstance, it can be a very key ally. Fans, and we sort of saw that last year in a way when you think about it, around the Singapore Grand Prix with Carlos Sainz. You remember that? Carlos, himself a director of the Grand Prix Drivers Association alongside George Russell, was talking about when the FIA World Feed would cut to the garages to watch celebrities instead of the key moments of the Grand Prix, and it harming the overall spectacle. Immediately after that race, we saw far fewer of those cuts. That was good. A balance was struck. The drivers were listened to using the one currency that has become priceless: audience comprehension and tolerance. We're seeing the Formula One drivers adapting to the regulations, and remember Section B, in that if you speak out in a really big way, you could find yourselves fined or docked points. So instead of threatening to retire from the sport or boycotting the sport itself, just make the sport sound that little bit more annoying. That might be the sharpest foam in your arsenal right there, and it's not exactly happening in a vacuum either. The defending champion Lando Norris has wandered into the line of fire and has just made it all the more interesting when you think about it. When Verstappen got loud about not enjoying the new cars, Lando joked about Max finding something else to do with his time. Then Norris half backtracked, half clarified his position. Him basically saying, oh, I agree with a lot of the concerns, and I also enjoyed your lot's reaction to me saying the opposite. That, Lando, was not funny. Because champions are supposed to be anchors. And whilst you could easily interpret what Lando said as just a little bit of playful banter is all, well, to me, it came across as him projecting uncertainty regarding these new regulations and where he stands with them. And fans can sense that wobble instantly. Max, meanwhile, comes across as something a lot more solid in that he's talking about the viewer's experience and how that could be impacted, whereas Lando is just talking about having a little bit of fun with his so-called mate, even though he then goes and says that, oh, Max isn't his mate. What is it then? It just reminds me of everything in 2024 again, when he was challenging for the title, that he would come in hard against Max and people go, yeah, that's that kind of killer spirit we like, and then backpedals it again. It just makes things less genuine, you know? And it will really matter more now he's a world champion. He joins a very, very elite club of champions still in F1. We're talking Max, we're talking Lewis, we're talking Fernando. He's not really made a good first impression in that regard. What Max is doing is not a role champions often play because it can be risky, like you're making excuses or something, but he's doing it anyway, the Dutchman, exerting his authority. Whereas Lando, all he's doing is just creating vulnerability, that he looks like he's reacting to things whilst Max looks like he's shaping things. Nando and Lewis, they do have weight too, but as I said, they are pretty tired. Let Max take charge on this one, they'll back him up. But that McLaren angle is where things get properly juicy too, because the new cars are begging for a teammate civil war to happen. Because one good thing of the new FIA regulations is that they are making the cars lighter and that little bit more nimble. Thank you very much. There is less downforce to be had, and thusly there are more consequences. And when you think about it, the way that these new regulations play out are making drivers less drivers and more like fighter pilots. Because pilots manage systems under immense pressure. They are having to deal with many buttons and switches whilst going at a very, very fast lick. You're not only attacking, but you're managing the machine's moves and the limits. You might want to go and do something with your own tools, but you might not be able to because the computer might say no to you. You might just have to wait. When energy recovery becomes the main act and lifting and coasting stops being optional, something which Charles and Lewis knew all too well last year, the lap stops being constant aggression and instead becomes rhythm. You drive hard inside a system that punishes you for being too human, which might explain why Max talked about anti-racing with his original steroids read. And then there's Oscar Piastri. He's already talked about abnormalities in energy harvesting that change depending on the track, not necessarily aero balance being at the forefront. It's about the energy system itself. Instead of just purely attacking a particular lap, especially in qualifying, you might really have to think long and hard about when exactly you can harvest and when you can actually deploy it, as in Sector 3 is going to be a very important thing to consider. And that might affect Lando in a way, because he is really brilliant when it comes to feel in that particular instant and then adapting, whilst also keeping those tyres on edge without falling off a cliff, whereas Piastri, he's a lot more clinical. He is a guy that goes to the absolute limit and doesn't go any further than that. And he very rarely lets emotion get the better of him when he's behind the wheel, even though he has slipped up quite a few times. He is a guy who is really smooth with his driving style. And admittedly, that was something that really bit him in the bum when it came to the final third of 2025, when he himself admitted that he was driving too smoothly. In fact, he even admitted that after the Mexican Grand Prix, he had to change up his driving style and being that slightly bit more aggressive. Well, fortunately for him, the new regulations might actually lean back to his original style of being smooth. The sport might reward you if you have to harvest in a particular area, whether you like it or not, and you just completely roll with the punches. You just go, fair dinkum, mate. In short, Norris has a hard driving style, he races with feel, whereas Piastri likes to be in total control. And these regulations might punish those little micro corrections. You know, whenever you see the T-cam and there's like all these inputs like the driver goes as in like well, that might not be as big an advantage with these 2026 rules, because if you're making all those micro corrections, it might impede your actual braking and harvesting the energy. You could lose those extra few % of battery power, which might leave you stranded at the end of the straight or later on in the lap. And the worst part of it is that in race circumstances, nobody knows how bad the trade-off is and how badly this could impact drivers. There could be a scenario where Lando has to adapt his driving style into something that really isn't his optimal solution. And it's not just the McLaren boys that are talking about this. The entire grid is uncertain as to what exactly will unfold with these regulations. Even Charles Leclerc is saying, and he's one of the favourites for the title, that there could be chaos with these rules, and the Ferrari itself looks like one of the more controlled cars. The entire grid will be psychologically tested because, again, Piastri has brought up a very good point in that with these regulations, they are being effectively told to forget everything they've learned since they were even back in their karting days. Just imagine telling an elite athlete in whatever category that, hey, all the stuff that you've learned up until now, forget all of that. You've now got to adapt. And yes, they will adapt, but it's still something that is really going against everything that they have been trying to find out about their very own style and purpose in the sport. A threat to their very identity. Which means a driver's partnership with his engineer may become more important than ever, so we'll be watching Lewis in particular now he's actually gotten rid of Riccardo Adami and will be having someone else. Because when the car becomes a moving compromise between driver intention and energy requirements, that relationship becomes a translator between what the driver feels and what the data demands. Long-standing pairings like Max and GP will be a very competitive weapon. How much longer that will last? Well, that's up for debate since GP has signalled a desire to move away from the front line in the not-too-distant future. It may also explain why the pecking order has been touted to be flipped up on its head this year. I'm not saying will, I'm saying might. There could easily be a situation where nothing really changes. Because nobody really knows for sure who exactly has gotten the power unit philosophy just so, even though many tout Mercedes. They did have some reliability issues in testing, whereas Ferrari was a little bit more bulletproof, and Red Bull 4 powertrains certainly exceeded expectations, and Audi really came on strong as well. So who exactly will be at the forefront? It's still something we'll have to get the spanner and the foam out for this, until at least Q3 of the Australian Grand Prix. And maybe not even until China or Japan, or maybe not until Europe. And we do very much also have to take Red Bull into this situation too, because the F1 world's watching them very closely how they handle this year, as it could upend the driver market in one reality if Max really doesn't like what they do. Because when Max talks about unknowns and question marks, he's also doing something else. He's preparing the audience for chaos in a way that protects himself. He's covering his arse, not because he's scared, but because he's smart like that. Because if Red Bull stumble early, he's already framed the season as a learning curve, not a defining moment in his career. That does give him some political cover if he were to complain about performance without him looking like he's whining or maybe looking for the exit or something. He stuck around with Red Bull, he denied Mercedes advances, even though they are getting very strong, in that Mercedes considers Verstappen.com Racing as one of their performance teams, as in a works team or a very close partner. And while doing this, he's holding a knife to the sport's most sensitive and biggest artery, which is clarity with its user base. Because Formula One is entering an era, it's already proven it, that one of its biggest stars can easily dictate where the sport goes, because not that long ago, the FIA could have just completely ignored driver feedback and told them just to suck it up and get on with the job. Bernie Ecclestone said it all the time, that drivers had very little brain. All they knew how to do was just drive the car. Their word didn't matter because the fans were already locked in. They were watching in their droves, and that's what mattered most. The money was coming in. That's why the GPDA kept ebbing and flowing in and out of existence. But today, Formula One is competing with just about everything. It's partly why Bernie Ecclestone was a complete dinosaur in that regard. He viewed social media as completely irrelevant and useless, whereas actually it's the complete opposite. You've got football, you've got boxing, you've got gambling websites, you've got Twitch, your YouTube, your TikToks, whatever future social media comes along. Boredom can be solved with just a swipe of your finger, and Formula One hates that, but then also loves that. It loves it if it becomes the object of somebody's eye after swiping away, but it really hates it if they presented something and it might require a little bit more explaining, but then the average Joe just goes, swipe, you're gone, goodbye, because that took too long to explain. You have to get that hook instantly and have something you can instantly understand. That's why Formula One's been really pushing it with all of those explainer videos, trying to get everything out there in the open before round one, so that means more likely people will have a better understanding than they would have done had they just gone in a bit more blind. Formula One is terrified of losing fans. Formula One's playing a very dangerous game here, trying to appeal to the nerdy fans and the casual fans. It's not exactly succeeding in any of those camps. Both sides are left scratching their heads or not having exactly glowing things to say about it. Therefore, Max might have just found out the best way to do things is just say to Formula One, hey, if you're not too careful, you might leave fans behind. And F1 might have no choice but to respond because they fear their audience. And that may also redefine what a champion can be. A champion used to be simply the one who wins and then complains about the car being too slow. A modern champion can also be a kind of cultural regulator, someone who drags the conversation toward what the sport should feel like. That may be the biggest problem for F1 these days, is that the racing becomes emotionally confusing. And the moment a casual fan starts asking, wait, why did he back off? The mystique just fades that little bit more. I mean, not for everyone, no. Hardcore fans like me, I'm really looking forward to these new regulations. I think they could be really, really cool. And I just love to know more about the sport that I've been following for nearly 30 years at this point. But the way that Formula One chooses to grow relies on people who may not necessarily want to do the homework. They may be quite content or simply do not have the financial income to pay for paywall experiences, 30, 40 pounds or dollars a month or something. They may just be happy to get by with social media content, Drive to Survive, as well as what Formula One produces on YouTube. You know, the highlights of qualifying and the race and the sprint, etc. But Max, well, he's not exactly being tactful with this. He is making this sport choose its audience. Choose the manufacturer-friendly electrification story that makes Audi and Honda feel comfortable, or choose clean, readable racing that casual fans can follow. F1 wants both, but the cosmos rarely allows that. And remember when I said Max had the FIA over the barrel? He's pointing at that barrel and saying, well, hey, you built this, you figure it out. And I don't think Max is moaning for the sake of it. He's trying to negotiate with the sport in a way which will get to the very top of the chain. And it really helps that he's got a lot of credibility and manifested a lot of goodwill from multiple fandoms with F1's fanbase. Because heck, even the Tifosi respect Max these days, and that's saying something considering that Max is not one of their own. Yet. Believe me, if Ferrari wanted to, they would certainly try and make that happen. In fact, Max is happy to the idea as long as they can produce a car which is capable of winning right at the get-go. He doesn't want to have to do all of the legwork. Well, I mean, if Ferrari goes on to win the Constructors in 2026, that might be more likely. So what I'm saying to you now is just watch what happens next, because, as I touched upon at the beginning of the video, Formula One has already had to change some of its own terminology because it really lacked communication or clarity, as in, we were all confused by it. I mean, X mode and Z mode to me sounds cool. Almost as cool as Cadillac's name of their car, the Mach 26, but I do get why they had to change it. It sounds drier, it sounds more basic, but it did need to be basic. And then all of those modifications to the race starting procedure, you know, that extra blue light, those 5 extra seconds to allow the car to spool up and then go properly without danger of wheel spin or crashes and what have you. The FIA did listen to concerns from McLaren and the drivers very quickly. They adapted very, very swiftly, unlike back in the day, whereas they would have probably been told, oh, just deal with it. And maybe what they can do is take all of that energy management and make it less critical for the cars actually doing what they're supposed to be doing. Make it a little bit more fun. Make it part of the story. Add a little bit of extra drama without making it look like it's going to be anticlimactic, as in, you know, we're talking about battery levels down the straight. You know, it gets to 5%. They just about make it work. Whereas, as we saw in testing, it all runs out of puff about 300 meters before the actual straight is over, and then nothing really happens. And most of all, watch Norris, because this could be where being the defending champion gets a little bit uncomfortable. Yeah, he can absolutely defend his title on pace and skill and McLaren's strength in starting off a little slower than the rest but developing effectively, thanks to their technical team. But champions also defend their aura. That's something a little harder to measure. And when Norris is telling the world he was enjoying rage-baiting them effectively, reacting to his comments, he's playing in the arena of perception where Verstappen's already acting like a veteran politician. Meanwhile, his teammates out here talking about energy harvesting as well as the other intricacies of the new rules, like he's been reading the instruction manual from cover to cover. These new regulations require a lot of studying and a lot of research, and that is something that Piastri has already demonstrated for himself, including Max Verstappen with him coming up with his own techniques, Kimi Antonelli considering F1 like speed chess, oh he's gonna love these, and Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton, well, they're just loving life right now. There's far less pressure on their shoulders, whereas with Lando, there is all the pressure. So maybe the stories evolve from Max against the FIA or Max against the rules, but instead, Max has found the one argument that Formula One might actually listen to and change things up really, really quickly, instead of waiting until 2027 or 2028, and by then, the audience figures for Formula One might have actually started to drop. You don't want that now, do you? You want to try and at least keep things on the constant, to at least find a way of protecting Formula One from itself and making sure it's still a sport that many people can understand. All by introducing doubt, which is something Formula One really, really hates. Because question marks, they can be scary, but equally, scary can become engaging, and engagement easily translates itself to money. But if those question marks end up being answered with too much jargon, they do not become scary. They do not become as engaging, at least not to the majority of customers, and they will tune out and go and find something else to watch. I mean, who knows, they might end up falling into Formula E. You know, how ironic would that be? That, my friend, is the barrel. And I'm about to send you barreling over to this video right here, which I know that you will enjoy. I'll see you over there.